Welcome. Really excited to get this spring practice underway. As we said a couple of weeks back, this has really been a very strong off season. I've been extremely proud of the way our guys have responded to it. It's kind of fun as you start to learn the personality of a group. And we had our coaching stations a couple of weeks back, and a chance for all our coaches to fully get back around our guys, see the work that Coach Wiley and our strength staff have done with them, and you start to get a feel for the personality of this team. And I like the way this team works, without a doubt. And we're still kind of young, new, unproven in a lot of areas, but you can feel a strong sense of cohesion with this group already. I've been very proud of how our mid-years have come in and done a great job handling this big transition, handling our strength program academically, all that. It's definitely been one of the strongest groups that we've had in from a mid-year perspective so far. So can't wait to get those guys on the field as well. So I think we've got a tremendous schedule laid out. We've got a group that is pretty healthy, limited. Here in these first couple of practices is going to be Nick Benito, Marcus Major, Justin Broyles, and De'Laren Turner-Yell. Some of those guys recovering from some things that happened during the season. Nothing serious, all guys that we expect to have sooner rather than later here in spring ball. The guys that will be out with that have had surgeries and are on the mend right now: Trey Sermon, Jalen Redmond, Theo Howard, John Michael Terry. So all expected, all of those guys doing well. Those guys will all be full participants in our next off-season period after spring ball, and all four of those guys doing extremely well. Two position changes that we're going to look at here to start. Both Robert Barnes and Jamal Morris, we're going to work at linebacker here this spring. Two guys that when we recruited them, had the length, the potential to get that big, and we always knew in the back of our minds that this was going to be an option. Didn't know exactly how that would play out, but we've gone forward with that this entire spring. So we've put those guys on a plan to obviously add just a little bit more weight to their frames and be ready to go, so that we can take a look at them at inside linebacker here this spring. And then also would want to announce this spring, or these last few spring games have been tremendous, just with the way our fans have responded, the way our administration's responded. We've done obviously a lot of new things, making the game more of a true game format, added all kinds of entertainment. We had the night game last year, which obviously getting ready to have another great 5 o'clock kickoff. So it's really become a tremendous event for fans, recruits, our team, everybody, and that's something, that's a tradition that we want to continue and even further. To highlight the festivities of this weekend, and there'll be plenty more going on around the game that we're going to announce here in the near future, but we are going to unveil Baker Mayfield's Heisman statue, and in a little bit of a new thought process, or a new approach to that, is we're actually going to unveil it in the stadium, and that will be a part of the game. So we'll release some more details, talk more specifics about how that's going to happen. But I think the thought is, instead of a ceremony outside the stadium, why not include all 50, 60, 70,000, whatever is there, why not include all of them in that moment? So going to be a pretty cool historic moment for this program, and just add to all the great things we're going to have going on around our spring game. So excited about practice, and certainly looking forward to April the 18th at 5 o'clock.
Okay, we'll start questions. James.
Lincoln, your quarterbacks are not experienced this year. I mean, Tanner's played a little bit. Spencer hasn't played at all. So is it a different process in the spring, or is it like you've done so many other times before?
Yeah, it's different. It's they're not experienced, but they're experienced here. So it's Yeah, it's definitely been a different process than certainly compared to last spring. I would say it's been more similar to, like the years, especially maybe the year where we had Austin and Kyler, kind of both coming back, and both guys had been, neither one had played a ton yet, but they had both been in the system, had both been in our program. So, yeah, there's some game experience that these guys don't have and aren't going to have. We get that, but there's no doubt it is nice to have guys that have been here, and it's not all just brand new. At this time last year, obviously we were force feeding, especially Jalen, at that point, trying to get him caught up as fast as possible. So it's been a little bit different tone in there because of that. And but I think they're guys that are ready. I mean, we're very excited about the guys that are in that room, the guys that they've been able to learn under during their time. I feel like they're both ready to be the starting quarterback here. And if we didn't, we would have brought somebody else in. I mean, we've obviously had a history of that, but these guys are ready. They're good enough. They're talented enough. It's their time.
Kerry Murdoch.
Lincoln, you mentioned back before workouts started, like the coaching stations. I know you guys made like some videos about that. What is that all about, and what did you learn kind of about your team maybe that you wouldn't know without that heading into the spring?
It's kind of our version of, there's kind of the, your boot camp, your week of hell, however you want to describe it. It's kind of our version of it. It's evolved through the years, I think. I think like anything, you try to design it based on what you think your team is or what you think your team needs. I think as we've had some new faces in on the coaching staff, that's changed the perception of it because it is run by the coaches. And I think it's just kind of a snapshot for us to kind of put off-season on hold for a week, the specific training, and just get these guys together. And we, it's without giving too many details, it's something we do early each morning. Guys are graded very specifically on some key categories. Guys are put in very, very adverse situations physically and mentally to see, one, how do they handle it? Two, you start to see leaders emerge within the group. You start to see the personality of the group. And I think it helps you as coaches it helps you figure out, maybe where we're at maybe at this point and where we need to go, how we need to attack it. It's one of the best things I think that we do, to put guys in situations that are very similar to game situations where unexpected, very difficult things are going to come up, and you start to figure out who can handle it and who's not ready to yet.
Go to Cliff Brown.
Yeah, Coach, does it matter to you if one or the other quarterback establishes himself as the front runner during the spring, or do you feel expect that to carry over into the fall?
No, it doesn't matter. I'm certainly not opposed to if we had a clear-cut starter after spring of doing something then. I do think there's advantages to that if you're able to do that. Team knowing who the starter is going to be, probably first and foremost. And there's definitely some advantages both ways. I just think you have to let these things play out. I know, everybody wants to come to conclusions. Everybody wants to know, what it's going to be. But and I know these things get dissected every which way, and I know they're going to continue to forever. That's just the nature of the business. But to me, it's so simple. It's the very core of team sports. It's you let however many people you have, you let them just truly compete for a spot, and may the best man win. And to me, it's that simple. And so I've never felt any pressure on it to have a timeline, to feel like it needs to be done by here, by there. There's obviously a timeline at some point on the back end of this as you start to get close to the first game. But I think these things you have to let them evolve, and each one of them is different. And So it'll be fun to watch these guys because they're both prepared and both experienced and both very talented players.
Tyler?
Lincoln, how long have you guys been tinkering with the idea of putting Robert at linebacker, and how quickly do you want to have that sort of resolved as it relates to filling Kenneth Murray's spot?
Yeah, we had some conversations late last year. Once we'd all made the decision and to redshirt Robert, it was a conversation about just kind of his future, the way his body had evolved, and then also I think for him and all of us getting to see, what Speed D looks like and, where does he best fit in that. And I think that combined with, certainly losing Kenneth and some opportunities there at inside linebacker, it just made sense all the way around. So even at the end of the year last year, kind of through his training, we started to kind of slowly put a little bit of weight on him. And then as we decided to go full speed ahead with this, we've been a little bit more aggressive. And, he's responded well, done well. So we're going to have some depth and talent in that room, though. I mean, without a doubt. Obviously having Caleb back full speed, Deshaun White back, Brian Asamoah has really had a tremendous offseason so far, and I think one of the more talented guys in that room. Brian Meade has been a kind of a steady fixture in that room for several years now, and then Shane Witter's really come in and done a nice job. He's been very, very impressive for a young guy here so far. So it's going to be a very competitive room.
Was Robert's redshirt year, was that kind of tailored for? I mean, did that end up happening because there was a position change that was going to happen, or was he held back because of health reasons or anything?
No. I think it was one of those situations where just kind of looked at where he was and opportunities for the future. I don't know that was necessarily that those two decisions were made at the same time. I think more was about kind of where he was as a player at that point, and thinking that year could be of benefit. And then as time went on, it just were conversations that we continually had and made sense all the way around.
Jason Kersey?
Yeah, Lincoln, Major League Baseball and the NHL and NBA have all either loosened or eliminated marijuana testing. I'm curious if you think that's going to happen at the college level, and if you think it should happen at the college level.
I do think it's going to happen. When is everybody's best guess, but if you look at the trends in other sports, I think you would certainly say probably sooner rather than later. That just seems to be the way that the world's going. Would I like to see it happen? My deal is the welfare of the student athlete and what best helps that. And I think as far as marijuana testing, I mean we're operating in a different world than it was 10, 15 years ago. I mean, so many things obviously around that with laws, availability, the perception of it. I mean, it's everything's changed, and so I think we've got to continue to adapt to. And I know we're certainly from our end trying to study, if what we are doing is working, what is working, what's not working. Also looking at attacking it more from a student-athlete welfare perspective, to maybe give you an idea of some of the talks we've had. Let's say we had a player maybe that had an issue with abusing alcohol. It's not necessarily illegal from an NCAA standard, this and that. We would sit down and talk to this player. We would get him counseling. We would approach it more from a wellness and, one, being healthy for the rest of your life, putting yourself in good situations, helping you perform athletically, academically, all those things, and tried to do everything we could. And I don't know that we've all necessarily been able to do that with marijuana specifically because of the ramifications of a guy testing positive. And, you're talking about things that can be very, very devastating to these guys. One, their careers, their scholarships. Obviously, when something like that happens in this day and age, word tends to leak and, can really damage or destroy reputations. I mean, it's it's made it kind of the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. And so, like we do with every part of our program, we're trying to evolve. We're not saying, well, we've just done it always like this, so that's how we'll do it. We're trying to improve and make sure we're doing everything we can for our student athletes. So I don't know that I have all the answers right now, but it is ever evolving, and it's something we're continuing to look at to make sure we're handling it the very best that we can.
Just a quick follow-up. You can't drive 5 feet in the state without seeing a dispensary.
Right.
So I'm wondering if a player on your roster has a medical card issued by the state, are they exempted from those tests?
Currently, no.
John Hoover.
Yeah, Lincoln, the spring practice is such a big time for teaching the players, but with you hiring 2 new coaches, I'm curious, when you bring somebody in and they have to learn your system,
right,
your philosophies, they have to learn their players and all this stuff. How much teaching goes on with those guys? And what's your level of expectation for what they're going to be able to do this spring?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's that's one of the main reasons that you want to get these guys in soon. These 2 guys that we just hired are both very smart guys. I mean, those guys coming into these staff rooms and picking up what we're doing hasn't been a problem at all. Didn't anticipate that it would be. I do think it helps that they're walking into rooms that are experienced around them. Guys that have been in their respective offensive and defensive system now for multiple years, and on top of that, they're both very sharp guys. I think the bigger or the more important component is learning the players and being able to spend time with those guys to start to develop the relationship and trust that you need to coach these guys at a high level. And so we do some things behind the scenes to try to help those guys catch up and to be around our players maybe even more than we normally are to start to build those relationships. And both DeMarco and Jamar have done a great job of that so far. But certainly one of the exciting things of spring, just like excited to see new players and new team and all that, you're excited to see the new coaches and how they get out and work. And certainly have I think made a great impression on our guys and just our whole program here in a short time already.
To follow that up, you said things you do behind the scenes to help them catch up. Is there anything you can shed light on?
Yeah, I mean, I think we just try to create as many opportunities for those guys to get around our players as possible. And then I think you got to create opportunities for the rest of the team, maybe not exactly in their position group, to get to know these guys and get to see with their personalities and get a feel for what they're like. Because each guy, we don't just tell our staff, all right, Jamar, you're responsible for the D ends and outside linebackers and whatever your special teams role is, and then everybody else, don't worry about them. I mean, you want each guy to have an impact, and all of our coaches are guys that you want them to have an impact on all of our guys. You want one of them to be able to grab an offensive lineman, or for DeMarco to be able to grab a DB and just talk to these guys. And maybe it has nothing to do about football, but for that, I think the team has got to be able to get to know them, and that's one of my jobs is continuing to create opportunities for that to happen.
Let's go to Barry Trammell.
Well, you said if you didn't like your quarterback, you have brought in somebody new. Mm-hmm. With the success you've had, particularly with Jalen, were you contacted quite a bit from, say, grad transfers, and did you give any thought to any of those guys?
We got some calls. Yeah, we got a couple, but no, zero temptation there. I mean, we were very honest with everybody that was not going to happen.
Also on the quarterbacks, you talked about you're not adverse to picking a starter as soon as you know who it is. Mm-hmm. The decade, 10 years ago with Leach, especially that stretch where you had a new quarterback every year.
Right.
How did he do it? How did it? You remember how quarterbacks were picked and when?
Yeah, I remember. We had a couple that were just very obvious. I know B.J. Simmons was. That was pretty clear he was going to be the guy. I remember Sonny Cumbie, and we had brought in a transfer quarterback from Reedley. Robert Johnson ended up playing receiver for us there, but they kind of duked it out into camp. So it's kind of different each year, and I've seen it happen a lot of different ways. The majority of the ones that I've been directly involved with have played out, but in those times we've had multiple good players in the room. And so, I mean, I think that's always one is, do you feel just good about these guys? Are there starters in this room? If there's only one, then and only one guy that can do it, it's pretty obvious. But thankfully we have those guys. We've got quality depth, and we've got the opportunity for it to be a real competition. I mean, if you've got one guy that's just head and shoulders above everybody and everybody knows it and it's very clear-cut and easy, then kind of like we did with BJ in 2003, do it right away and let the team build around the personality and go ahead and get the reps where he's getting the starter share of the reps and go. But you can't force feed that. It's got to be right.
Bob Brisbillo.
Yeah, Lincoln, I know you have Eric Swenson coming back at left tackle, but how happy were you with what Stacey Wilkins did last year, and how ready is he to make that next step?
He's got a chance. He had a pretty good redshirt year. Played pretty decent in the games that he came in. Really developed some strength, which was probably the most important thing for him. He's a gifted athlete. He has elite length. He can really bend and really move. So for us, it was adding a few pounds, hardening his body, and then adding both some upper and lower body strength, which he's done that. So I certainly feel like he's ready to compete. And then I would say just the offensive line as a whole, we're looking at a lot of different combinations right now. I'll put it that way. Where guys have played in the past may not necessarily be where they'll be in the future. We're, as a group that, we feel like needs to play a lot better for us. I mean, very simply, we all got to do a better job. Now, granted, the way our group played last year, 99% of the teams in the country would have been pretty happy with it. But our expectations around here on the offensive line are a little bit different than most.
Gary Neiman.
Lincoln, have you watched much XFL?
The Renegades. I caught a little bit of Smallwood the other day too, but I've watched. I think I've only maybe missed one of Bob's games.
Is there anything they're doing in terms of the rules, something that could be applied to the college game?
Oh yeah, I definitely. I think it's very intriguing what they're doing on the kickoff. We're still able to have a return, but you're minimizing these high-speed impacts. I think it's very interesting. You do lose some of that, the onside kick, and how do you figure all that in? I know is part of the discussion there. I think the play clock's interesting. The game moves very quickly. I'm still kind of interested to watch how the point after a touchdown plays out. Where they've got the ability to choose. I think there's some interesting parts to that. But yeah, if I had to say one right now that to me definitely makes some sense, the kickoff I think is I think it's a good thought.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's been enacted yet because I don't know if they've had an overtime game, but the sort of the shootout format, if there's a tie, is that feasible?
I think it is. I'd be interested to see how it plays out a little bit, but I think it is. The other thing I love too, just maybe it's more from the fans' perspective, I love being able to hear what the replay guys are thinking up in the booth. I think that is. There have been a couple times last year. I'd love to have that in our games.
Lee Benson.
Coach, I noticed you didn't mention Trey Norwood at the top. How is he doing? How's his availability? And also with Jamal and Robert moving to linebacker and then Parnell obviously leaving. I mean,
right.
How would you assess? I know last year Coach Grinch talked about the depth in the secondary a lot. How would you assess the depth there going into the spring?
Yeah, depth is good. It's certainly better than it was last spring, and it's going to get quite a bit better when we get the rest of the class here in June. Trey Norwood doing very well, exceeding expectations on rehab time. He's going to be there's going to be no limits on what he can do this spring, and he was an active participant in coaches' stations, so ahead of the curve. I mean, we're going to be we're going to be smart with him in spring, but he's going to be able to get a lot of reps. So, you know, he's done a great job. Our medical team's done a tremendous job getting him back. He certainly gained a lot of strength during that time too, you know, which I think is going to make him a much better player. So, yeah, we're thrilled to have him back. And yeah, I think depth's going to be. We're definitely going to be a good place. There were times last spring where, especially at corner, there were some days where it was tough to even get near the amount of snaps that we wanted to get. So we're going to be a deeper, more experienced group for sure.
Eric Bailey?
Lincoln, are you guys any closer to resolution on suspensions, and do you expect those players to attack spring the way they did bowl game prep?
Yeah, very open-ended timeline on that. There's a lot of processes, discussions that are taking place. So I will, as soon as they give me any clarification on it, I'll make sure that you guys know. Yeah, and those guys are going to work. I mean, it's we're just gonna, those guys won't start a drill, and other than that, they're gonna go practice and get better, just like the rest of the team. So they've all had very strong off seasons, doing a great job.
One more question. I wanted to ask you about Alex. After his first year, his name started popping up for head coaching positions, similar to after your first year at Oklahoma. What's it like being the head coach, seeing that, versus what you felt like the first year after being offensive coordinator here?
Well, it's exciting because, I mean, it means, people recognizing, the job that Alex, our defensive staff, and players have done here in such a short time. Those things don't happen unless there's positive results. So, yeah, and it was great. It was great having some of those conversations with Alex that I can remember, Bob having with me during that time, and being able to relate to some of the things going through his head and decisions that you have to make. And, we've got a really, really good working relationship. And so, there's no doubt he's going to be a really great head coach in the future. So, those are all positive things. Those are the things that happen when you have success. So I'm hoping he gets a bunch more calls here in the next few years.
Ryan Aber?
Lincoln, you sort of alluded to earlier the division of responsibilities as it relates to special teams. You figured out how exactly you're going to break that down, and what are the advantages of doing it that way?
Yeah, we have. Coach Beamer's going to take a larger role. We're not going to have a titled special teams coordinator. We think our guys' titles and kind of where we're at there are appropriate. So we're not going to have a person that has special teams coordinator listed next to their name, but if we did, he would be the guy. And then it's still going to be a combination of our other coaches being involved with the other teams. There are specific responsibilities, but honestly, from a schematic standpoint, I don't really want to say who's going to do what, because it does provide some advantages for us early in the season.
Myron Patton?
You lost a lot of receivers, CeeDee Lamb, along with Grant Calcaterra and Baskin, those guys, Lee Morris. How big a spring is it for a guy like Charleston Rambo, who got his first extensive playing time? Just improving, but also I would think some leadership there that's going to be missing.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Very talented room, but very, very thin, and in some respects inexperienced. Yeah, it's going to be important. I mean, he's a guy that we're going to need to take the next step. He really, really did some nice things last year, especially in the beginning of the year. Made some big, very important plays. I think he's got a lot of confidence going forward. And our quarterback's got a lot of confidence in him as well. There's been a lot of things just physically that he needs to improve on, adding some weight and strength, which he's done that. Saw him in the indoor a couple of days ago, and his body is really, probably more than any period that I can remember, has really started to change and really develop. And so, yeah, excited about that. And, yeah, we are going to need him to lead us and to lead that group, because he is one of the older, more experienced guys in that room, and going to be a lot of young guys that are going to be asked to contribute and get a lot of opportunities. But you have to have leaders in that room, and he has to be that guy for us, period. And both in his play and the way he carries himself and the way that he pushes his teammates.
Creed's a guy who wasn't around last spring for you guys. Talk about maybe how disappointed you were with how things went with the expectations of that group how important is it that Creed's going to be going through with the 3 other guys that are returning off this starting offensive line last year?
Yeah, I mean, and I wouldn't say, disappointed. I would just say, we just have a high standard here. And, you don't still produce like we did offensively by being bad on the offensive line. We certainly weren't bad by any stretch, but we need to be better and we expect to be better. And, certainly having our leader there is important for the development of this group, not only just some continuity and all that, but just the kind of the mentality of the group as that builds. And, you need that guy there. And so I think it'll be important for Creed as a player too. Expectations for him to play his very best ball, and it takes a lot to do that. And so he's got to get, playing the very best he can, lead these guys. And group's hungry right now, and we need them to be.
I know you talked a lot about how successful the 7:30 kickoff was for the spring game last year. Having it 5 this year, what were some of the benefits that you guys saw in getting that kickoff a couple hours earlier?
Yeah, we hoped it would maybe be a little bit more versatile time for our team, for our fans, our recruits, kind of everybody, in that it's, still going to be under the lights. It's going to give, people within a couple-hour radius here time if they choose to come enjoy all the festivities that day, see the game, and still get home at a reasonable hour. So, we just kind of thought it made the most sense, and I know the response has been very strong so far.
Okay, time for just a couple more. Kerry Murdoch.
You kind of addressed it earlier, but, Alex was always very honest and didn't sugarcoat what his situation was in the secondary. I'm curious, just going into an offseason off of that LSU game when it was pretty much worst-case scenario for young guys like Woody, are you concerned about that affecting guys going forward, or is it just if you're not ready to play, you're not ready to play, and that just proves it?
No, I mean that's one game, and you can point to a bunch of other games where we really played extremely well in the secondary. Obviously the goal. Yeah.
Play all year.
Yeah.
That was their first.
No, I think because I do think there were a lot of positives. I mean, there's so much that a guy like a Woody Washington can take and learn from that. And there was, Woody specifically, there was a lot of things in that game he did extremely well that when you go back and watch the tape and that was his real first playing time, and you watch several of those plays, you're like, wow, that's pretty good considering the circumstances, the environment, the amount of practice reps. I mean, all those. So, no, I think it's a positive for those guys without a doubt. We've even mentioned a few times that a few of those guys that got extended playing time in that game that were young, that maybe it was a little unexpected, or with the injuries, suspensions, all of that, you can tell they did in a positive way, because there's just an experience factor, and having been in that environment that you just can't replace. And so no, I think it's already been a positive. I think it'll continue to be.
Okay, last one, Cliff Brown.
Yeah, Coach, with football, you got a lot of guys in close quarters. You got spring break coming up, guys possibly traveling.
Yeah.
With that in mind, is coronavirus on your radar?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Now I give our administration credit. We've kind of tacked that from the front end. So we always keep tabs on where our guys are going for spring break. We've done that a little bit earlier, been a little bit more aggressive with it this year. Had a couple of meetings to educate our guys, especially our guys that have had any considerations about leaving the country, about potential risks, how to handle it, ways to stay in communication. We had several guys that were going to go to a study abroad trip out of the country that's been canceled or potentially moved back into the States. We've had several guys that have canceled travel plans that were planning to go out of the country. So no, it's a concerning time, and the last thing you want is, something to change and a border to get shut down or a player to be exposed or not able to get back here. So we're monitoring it, educating our guys. Again, credit to our administration, everybody for kind of being on the front end of it.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you, guys.